All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another Webinar Wednesday here in Studio Q. I'll give a couple seconds here for everyone to roll in. As always, I do a quick little audio check in the beginning. If someone can just type in the chat that everything sounds good on your end, that way we know that we're ready to roll on our end. So, all right, perfect. And good morning to everyone. I feel like it's been a long time. It hasn't been that long, but I think we skipped a month and now I'm back in and it's good to be here. So and in the studio with us, we've got Dr. Hux this morning. So I'm excited to have her. So a few little housekeeping items in the beginning. There will be a poll question towards the end. So if you're wanting to receive a CEU certificate, please make sure that you answer that. And then also please, ask questions throughout. So I will be monitoring the chat. And so if there's anything that pops up that is timely to what Dr. Hux is talking about in the moment, I'll just interrupt her right away. No, I'm kidding. I will appropriately interrupt her, and we'll get that answered for you. So there also will be a question and answer section at the end. So if it's not something burning and you want to wait until the end of it, please ask at that time. So with that being said, Dr. Hux, thanks for joining me this morning.
It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. If you could tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, your title here, and what any cool projects or anything you're focusing on right now.
Okay. Well, my background is as a speech-language pathologist. I worked at University of Nebraska-Lincoln for 27 years, and during that time was coming up to quality living to do research. And then when I decided to leave the university, I came here to take the position as director of research, and that's been a wonderful expansion.
Absolutely.
Outside of the realm of speech language pathology into some other cool things, but also keeping my hand in my traditional areas. And actually today I'm going to be talking about a bunch of the research and the clinical application of that research that I've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years with some colleagues. That's funded through NIH.
That's amazing. I did really enjoy your watching your face light up when I asked you if you had a topic you could talk about to this audience. You were like, as a matter of fact, I do.
This is called hot off the press.
That's right. So, well, I know you've been an incredible addition to QLI here. So we're happy that you made it up here. So with that being said, I think I'm going to throw the reins over to you and let you take it away.
Okay.
Perfect.
So the topic today is helping people with aphasia read. And this is going to, as I said, this is a bunch of research that we've been working on for the last several years. And it's kind of we're finally at the time where we're ready to say, okay, we have some real concrete suggestions. This is how you make it work. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with you today. The objectives for today, I want to spend some time just real briefly talking about what kinds of reading problems people with aphasia have, because it's not just one problem, it's a combination of problems usually. And then 2 ways that you can accommodate for that. One is through text modifications, what's called aphasia-friendly formatting, which is really pretty straightforward and won't take us very much time at all. And then the other bigger area is ways that you can use technology to support reading by people with aphasia. I need to give credit to my collaborators. These projects that I'm going to talk about today and the application of the findings has been a group effort by Jessica Brown, Sarah Wallace, Kelly Nolman Porter, and myself. So this has involved QLI as well as Miami University in Ohio and University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then there's a bunch of their students who also, I did not list all of the students, but over the years, you can imagine how many students have tagged onto these projects and helped out.
That's amazing.
Okay, so I've broken this into 3 sections. We're first going to talk about what are the reading problems. Then we're going to very briefly and very quickly talk about modifying materials, how you do that, and then go into the technology applications. So aphasia affects all language modalities, and reading is just one of those modalities. So it's not surprising that people with aphasia are going to have trouble reading. That doesn't mean that they don't still want to read. And the quotes on this particular slide are from people with aphasia, explaining that they really want to continue reading, but they struggle to do it. Reasons why they want to do it are the same reasons that everybody else wants to read. They want to stay current with news events, with what's going on in their community. They use it for relaxation purposes. They use it to communicate with other people. So they have trouble reading, but they still want to be able to do it. Reading has become more and more essential in our society. We rely on reading actually almost more than we do on speaking at this point. We get a ton of information through the written modality because of internet connections, and also because of internet connections, we also do a lot of social engagement through the written word. So we send text messages and we send emails. We share personal information that way. We also get information from our doctors, from physicians through websites. There's, they'll connect with you through some type of platform where they're sending you results of test information if you just took some medical tests, or so there's a lot of personal needs that are conveyed through the written modality. There's a lot of just regular social interactions that are done through the written modality. And then, of course, there's still, I want to sit down and read a book, or I want to sit down and read the paper because I get pleasure from that. And there's, how do you follow a recipe if you can't read? So just daily activities. How do you, put together this latest gadget that you got from Amazon or whatever? You have to follow the written instructions in order to be able to move forward.
I do feel like sometimes even when I read those instructions, I still can't figure it out.
You can't figure it out. I know. I did that last night. Okay, so as I said, aphasia affects all language modalities. Aphasia is really a symbolic processing problem. We always call it a language problem, but it's any kind of symbolic processing. So language just happens to be the symbol system that we rely on the most. But language modalities, when I talk about the different modalities of language, we're talking about speaking and listening. So producing language, hearing language, and understanding it. Then you've got the written components of that, of reading and writing. And then gesturing is also a symbol system. It's not as formalized unless you're using sign language, but it's not as formalized as the others. But any one of these modalities or multiple modalities are likely to be affected when a person acquires aphasia. There may be relative strengths in one area compared to another. And when that occurs, you want to take advantage of that. But usually there's going to be at least some impairment in each one of those modalities. Now, specifically relating to reading, the problems with reading are in three areas. There may be a problem decoding words or sounding out words. This is what you learned how to do very early in elementary school. Kindergarten, first grade is all about what sounds go with what letters. And that's the basis for reading. So that skill of associating letters with sounds, it can be affected by acquiring aphasia. Or a person may still be able to decode the words, but can't assign the meaning to the words. So they can say what the word is, but they don't necessarily have the meaning associated with that word at their disposal. And so even though they can read it, they technically decode it, they can't understand what it means. And then the third problem is that they might have trouble understanding the sentence structure itself. So individual words may make sense to them, but you put those words into a sentence and the structure of the sentence is what they've lost. So they don't know how to interpret the syntax. So let's look at each one of those things separately. So decoding words. This is associating written letters with sounds. And we we learn to do this letter by letter. And then as we become more skilled at reading, we learn to recognize whole words at a time so that you're not doing that sounding out process unless it's a word you're not familiar with or a word you're not expecting. One of the cool technologies that we have available to us now is eye tracking technology, and we can use eye tracking to better understand what people do with their eyes when they are reading. So down at the bottom of this screen, down at the bottom of this screen, I have just a diagram of what might happen when a person reads a sentence. So they may first fixate on this word roadside, and you notice that the fixation is around the middle of the word. It's not that we go letter by letter through this word. We are looking at that word as a whole. And not only that, but we don't look at every word. So here the person might fixate on roadside, and then joggers, and then endure, and then sweat. But look what happens for the next words. Pain and are just skipped over. And that's because when we look at this word sweat, we see, oh, there's a space real soon after that word. So we know it's a short word. And then there's another really short word. And we pick up all of that information of about actually 15 letters in a standard font, 15 letters that are ahead of that word. And so we're really already processing pain and while we're reading sweat. And this lets us jump all the way forward so that we don't have to look at every word, and we see angry, drivers, in. Now we have to then jump to the next line. Notice we skip in the again and just go to name, skip of, fitness. Now this gets interesting here. The person here jumped to healthy, jumped over body, over may to seem, and then went, wait a minute, I didn't get something, and went back to healthy, and then body, skipped may and seem, reward. So there's this forward progression usually when we're reading, where we're jumping from word to word to word and sometimes skipping little words in between. But every now and then we missed something and we immediately jump back to a previous word so that we can check it and make sure that we understood what we read. So you are using the letter information, but you're using it to decode whole words at a time rather than going letter by letter by letter. We also use a lot of contextual information to help us understand what we're reading and what might be coming next. And again, that's what lets us do that skipping. I want to show you on the next slide. Here's an example of what eye tracking data would look like. This is a person without neurological impairment. So this is an adult reader, normal reader. And you notice right away that they're starting at the center of the screen here. That's because before this slide showed up in front of them, there was just a slide with a red dot right in the middle of the screen. And so that's what they were fixating on. And then as soon as this particular paragraph shows up, they jump up to the top of the paragraph and start reading. Now, if I play this, I'll play it straight through once first, and you can watch the progression of their eyes as they read. Okay, so you can see they're hitting almost every word. They skip some, like you can notice right here, they skipped they skipped his, but they're hitting most of the words, and it's a pretty smooth progression through this. Now I can take the same thing and slow it down, and so I'm controlling now the speed of this instead of just letting them do it. And you can see there, they've jumped from received to unexpected. Didn't quite get unexpected, went back to the beginning of the word to get that un. Jump to phone call, while, working at the office. Okay, and so they continue on, and this is really straightforward. They occasionally skip the little words, but usually it's just a straightforward progression as they continue reading through the passage. Let's compare that with a person who's lost that ability to decode. So some people with aphasia are going to lose the easy coordination or correspondence of letters to sounds. They haven't lost it entirely. It's a problem with accessing it. So the knowledge is still there. They just have trouble getting to it. So they can't easily associate letters with sounds. And that forces them to spend a long time looking at individual letters of a word, trying to figure out, okay, what does this word sound like? And so they're having trouble just decoding the word. This is what that would look like with a person with aphasia who has a decoding problem. And again, I'll just play it straight through first, and then we can slow it down. Okay, huge difference from what you saw on the previous slide. So basically here, all we're working on is a mug of, in the same time that the last person read 3.5 lines. So if you look closely at what's going on here, let me get it started. Okay, that increasing dot on as the dot gets bigger and bigger, that's the longer length of time that they're fixating at that spot. And they're really working on Wendy there still. Okay, and then we've got and they regress back to again. Stare at it a long time. They're still on Okay, we get to mug. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have 3, 4 attempts on mug. Go to coffee, I'm sorry, of, and a long fixation on of before they finally, I believe, well, it's off the screen here, they finally shift to coffee. So this is a person who's going letter by letter in order to decode this. And we call this letter by letter reading. It's very inefficient, takes forever, very, very difficult, very exhausting, time consuming way to engage in reading.
Does the amount of text on the screen impact maybe where they start or?
Okay. Yeah, this particular sample, this is just a clip that was in the middle of this. So this is not the beginning of the first one that I showed you. They were starting right in the center of the screen and then jumped to the beginning of the passage. That really was the beginning of the sample. This was in the middle of the sample.
Okay.
So the person had already worked through this first line of text and was halfway through the second line when we captured this particular video. Okay, so not everybody with aphasia has that decoding problem. They may still be able to decode, but they can't figure out the meaning of the word. And so there's several aspects to meaning that we use when we're trying to understand what somebody is saying to us or understand written text. There's what we call lexical information or semantic information, which is kind of the definition of the word. So bachelor, it's an adult unmarried male, or canary, a type of bird that's yellow. There's also morphological information in words, and these are the endings to words, and they tell us a lot about what kind of word it is and how a word is going to be used in a sentence. So my example here is did, does, done, and doing all relate to the verb do. So, and we recognize that as English speakers. Another aspect of meaning are word associations. So when you see one word, it automatically triggers information about related words. So you see the word doctor, immediately that pulls to mind related words like nurse or medicine or hospital or stethoscope. And that's where context becomes important. That if I already know I'm talking about a trip to the doctor's office, I'm not going to be surprised to see the word stethoscope or see the word nurse. And then another aspect of meaning that we don't often think of as being meaning, but it really is what part of speech that word is. So, and that's what role the word plays in a sentence. And the role that words play in sentences tell us a lot about what words can come before or after that word. So if I say the word the, you know, I have to say either a noun after that, or I have to say an adjective after that. Those are my only choices. I can't say the of, I can't use a preposition after it, or I can't use a verb after it. So that's part of the meaning of the word the. My example on the screen here is the word talk. Well, talk can actually either be a noun or a verb. So if I say the talk, you immediately know I was using it as a noun. So the talk was long. Or he talks too much. Well, the he talks, you've got your subject as he, and talks immediately with that morpheme on the end of the S, it tells you, oh, this is a verb. So I'm using talk as a verb there. That's all part of the meaning of words as well. When a person acquires aphasia, they may lose word meaning. Again, this is a problem with access, not knowledge. So it's just they can't pull up that information correctly. They may be able to decode the word correctly, but they still don't know what it means, or they lose some aspect of the associations with it. Okay, let's look at, let me do sentence structure first. Sentence structure is an expansion of that meaning aspect. The syntax of a sentence, or the structure of a sentence, tells you who is doing what to whom. So who's the actor, who's the recipient of that action. So in this case, we've got the man is, and these are examples of sentences that people produced when they were looking at the picture that's in the background here. So the man is watching the woman is watching the man. It's the exact same words in those two sentences, but they don't mean the same thing. That's because of the structure of the sentence. So it's a matter of who's doing the watching and who's being watched. For people with aphasia, simple sentence structures are usually easier than complex ones. It's not a guarantee that it's going to be that way, but it usually is. So we get sentences like, the man is not paying attention, the sink is overflowing, he's standing in the water. More complex sentences get really complex. The man obviously is not paying attention because not only is the sink overflowing with water, he looks like he's even standing in some water. So very, very complex syntax can be involved in this. Some simple sentences are also hard for people with aphasia, particularly passive voice sentences. So active voice, the girl helped the boy, it would not be a problem. Passive, the boy was helped by the girl, could be very difficult for a person with aphasia to understand. When a person with aphasia loses that fluidity in understanding, in processing sentence structure, they lose access to what role a word is playing in a sentence. So this can affect sentences of all length. He showed the baby the pictures, might be very easy for a person with aphasia to understand, but he showed her the baby pictures might be very hard. The problem is in understanding which words are modifying which other words, or assigning roles to these words. Again, I've got an example of a passive sentence. The apple was eaten by the boy. This is one where a person with aphasia would understand that sentence because world knowledge tells you that only people can eat apples. Apples don't eat people. So the apple was eaten by the boy. It must be the boy who's doing the action and eating the apple. But that's not understanding the syntax of the sentence. It's understanding real world, how things work in the world. Here is an example of a person with aphasia who can decode just fine, but has trouble with understanding the meaning. And again, let me just play it straight through and then we'll take some time to go through it bit by bit. Okay, now it's the beginning part of this that I particularly want to draw your attention to. Notice how many times the person goes back to check on understanding the meaning. So at this point, he's up on the title, the cat story, and reads that and jumps down. Actually, it looks like to the word spending, and spending time with Jack, his black cat, and then jumps back, his black cat, and then jumps back again, enjoyed spending time with Jack. Oops, Sam, got to get the first word there, didn't quite get it. Enjoyed spending, and then jumps, oh, got it, jumps to the next sentence. So there's all of this backtracking, regressive eye movements that we don't usually see in a person who's got normal reading ability. That's a clue that we have a problem with understanding either at a semantic level or at a syntactic level what's going on in the sentence. Okay, so what do we do about all this? The first thing is figure out what the person wants to do in terms of reading and how interested they are in reading and what kind of reading interests them. So not everybody's a reader. It's foreign to me because I can spend the entire weekend lying on the couch reading a book, but that's me. That's not necessarily everybody. So people have different reading interests, different reading abilities before their aphasia, and we need to know what that is. We also need to know, okay, how did the aphasia, the stroke, whatever caused the aphasia, how did that affect their ability to read? Based on that, we want to establish goals for that person. What do they want to do? And then we start experimenting with different reading supports and strategies. And there are two in particular that I'm going to talk about today, but we can really divide these into three sections. Adapt the materials, use self-directed strategies, so strategies that the person puts in place himself, provide external supports. And under that external supports, one of the options is technology support. The other option is partner assistance. Have somebody read to you, which works fine if you've got a willing partner who's ready to read to you, but that requires being dependent on another person. What we're trying to do is allow the person with aphasia to be as independent as possible in getting reading done, the reading that they want to do. Okay, so in this first idea of adapting materials, as I said earlier, this is called aphasia-friendly formatting or aphasia-friendly modifications. We can adjust the text, so a larger text size helps. Now, elderly adults often have vision problems anyway, so this is probably going to help with anybody who's an elderly adult, but people with aphasia are not necessarily always elderly adults. Sometimes they're young adults. That doesn't mean that they won't benefit from a larger text size. Even with a young adult, somebody who's has sustained some sort of brain injury, having a larger text size is not going to hurt. The next one is it goes along with that, but it's probably more important, increase the white spaces. So you want to have words separated by a fair amount of white space, just so that you can clearly see this is a separate word from this other word, and it's not as visually confusing. The next one is harder to do. Simplify vocabulary and sentence structure. That means somebody's got to rewrite what is written and make it have easier vocabulary to read, more familiar vocabulary, and sentence structures that are easy for a person with aphasia to understand. Now that requires a fair amount of knowledge of, okay, what is a person with aphasia going to be able to understand easily and what are they not going to understand easily? So that's where this adjusting the text using aphasia-friendly modifications becomes really hard, because somebody's got to do this, and that's going to be very time-consuming if you've got somebody a person with aphasia who really wants to read a lot. Somebody's got to modify all their materials, and that's not realistic. Finally, adding images is very, very helpful for people with aphasia. It gives them something to give them contextual information so that they can understand, oh, this is the gist of what's going on now. That's going to help me understand the words that I'm reading. At the same time, you want to teach the person with aphasia to use some strategies that they can implement themselves, and they will do this, some of these things pretty naturally, like looking for keywords. If a person is having trouble decoding words, then it's more important that they decode the main words, the nouns and verbs, than the little words. So, and the other thing that may happen is you may have a person with aphasia who can recognize certain words as whole words, like the names of familiar people. They might, or familiar places. They might say, oh yeah, I recognize that word. It does the same thing as adding images. It gives the person a way to say, oh, this is what this is about. So now when I work to read this word by word, I can understand ahead of time. I have a little bit of knowledge of what this is going to be about, and that helps. Obviously, asking someone else to read information aloud to them is a good strategy if you've got a person who can do that. That also requires that the person with aphasia have fairly good auditory comprehension. Remember, way back at the beginning, I said aphasia affects all language modalities. So it's not just reading that's impaired, it's going to be listening that's impaired also. So just having somebody read aloud to you is not going to work for the person who has a really severe auditory comprehension problem. Following along with your finger, again, it's the same thing as with young children. It helps you keep your place. It helps you to track where you're going and progress systematically through the material, and avoiding other distractions. So having a quiet environment is going to be helpful. Get rid of all the background noises, especially if the background noise is other people talking, because then you've got competing content. So pretty easy to do, except for this, simplifying vocabulary, that's hard to do, but takes a lot of time. Even if you're just going to increase the text size and the white space and add images, takes a lot of time to do that. So that's where this falls apart. It's not practical for everyday life. Here is an example. It's not a particularly good picture, but this was something we used for a research study, and we had an episode, a little story. The content of the story really isn't important, but the point was that we did it with aphasia-friendly formatting. So we used a large font size. This was an 18-point font size. We used simplified syntax and vocabulary, and we included a picture with it. And yes, we actually acted out these scenes. So this was a break-in. And we had a woman looking very surprised to find somebody on her couch. Okay, so limitations to aphasia-friendly formatting. Well, you got to find a text that is in aphasia-friendly format, or you've got to do the modifying yourself, which means you modify the font size and the spacing and the sentence structure and find the pictures. You got to do everything yourself, and that takes time. So that's the limitation. It helps a lot, but it's a limitation. Okay, that brings us to the next step. So as researchers, my colleagues and I said, well, this is great. Aphasia-friendly formatting certainly helps, but we know it's not practical to get a person able to read fluently in real life the materials that they want to be able to read. So we said, how about if we explore text-to-speech technology for people with aphasia? Would that help them? Would that boost their independence in reading? Now, text-to-speech technology is readily available. You've all got it on your computer system. It's the simultaneous presentation of spoken and written content. So you see the printed text, but you simultaneously can hear it spoken to you. The benefit of that is that you've got two modalities at the same time instead of just one modality. And we know that that helps people with aphasia. Even before we were even looking at reading issues, we were looking at auditory comprehension issues, and we would use written communication as a support. It's called written choice, as a support to help people understand what we were saying to them. So we were talking about, what'd you do this weekend? Last weekend, we would write the word weekend at the top, and then we'd write down options. Did you spend time with family? And we'd write down family. Did you go shopping? We'd write down shopping. Did you do yard work? We'd write down yard work. And then we'd say, or was it something else that I haven't written yet? And that way the person could point to their response, eliminating the need for a verbal response. But it was also supporting, giving the spoken and written modality to support each other. And that's very helpful for people with aphasia. So we thought, let's try it with reading. Maybe this is going to do the same thing. Text-to-speech systems also have features that are modifiable. So you can change the rate of speech. You can add highlighting to it. You can change the font size. You can change the voice. You can have a British accent if you want a British accent. You can have a male voice, a female voice. Some of the voices are much better than others. Some are very robotic. Others are really pretty natural sounding. And people have preferences, very strong opinions about what they like and don't like about that. Our goal was to see, could we use text-to-speech systems, not having to build a new system, but the existing systems that are out there, as a way of increasing the independence of people with aphasia when they approach reading tasks and improving their quality of life.
We did have a couple questions come through. So on your previous slide about the strategies, I believe it was more the two back. You were just talking about adding white space.
Oh, yes.
Those strategies. So
yes.
Mary did ask, so are these strategies used? Sorry, I just turned my face away from the microphone. Are these strategies used when you are dealing with people in the recovery phase, or is this something people have to use in daily life after recovery, or both?
It's both.
Both. Okay.
Okay. It's both. A person with aphasia is usually a person with aphasia for life.
Okay.
So they may recover a lot, and we always hope that they do, but there's no guarantee. And so the way I approach it is, I'm going to do something that helps the person today with their communication skills. And if they don't need it in the future, that's fine, nothing lost. I help them today. But most people with aphasia end up having at least some chronic aphasia. And so it's quite possible that people are going to need this for a long, long time.
Okay. And then Kelly asked a question about the technology, the text-to-speech.
Yes.
She was just asking if one of, I believe one of the systems, maybe your softwares, is DragonSpeak one of these that would be considered a technology used for this purpose?
Yes. Dragon Naturally Speaking is a speech-to-text system. So you speak and the computer writes down what you said. So it's actually going the opposite way.
Okay.
You can also have it read back to you, and that would be the text-to-speech system. And I have listed a whole bunch of systems for you, and I will tell you what we've used near the end of the presentation.
Perfect.
Because I know that's going to be a question of, so which one do you use?
Yep.
Okay. This is a slide that I didn't know how to do this. We've had so many studies that have come out about this topic, and I don't want to spend time going over them all because it's details, and that's not the gist of what you want. You want, what do I do with a person today? So here's the highlights of 6 or 7 years of research. Yes, people with aphasia can understand digitized speech or synthetic speech. So computer speech, that was our first question of, this is going to be a computer speaking to them. Are they going to be able to understand it? Yes, they can. Their comprehension accuracy is best if you have natural speech, but it's also very high for synthetic speech. So that was good news. Then we looked at comprehension accuracy when people listened and read passages, short passages and long passages. And the accuracy was highest in the text-to-speech condition. that's TTS, text-to-speech condition, for long but not short narratives, passages. So actually, the longer it was, the more benefit you got from the text-to-speech, it seemed. We then looked at comprehension accuracy if you did written only, auditory only, combined written and auditory. And the comprehension accuracy was highest in text-to-speech, the combined written and auditory, or the written only, because people could spend a lot of time studying it to go back. If it's auditory, then you just got one shot. You understand it or you don't. Then we started experimenting with, okay, what if we change the rate of speech? This was very interesting. Comprehension accuracy actually didn't change. We gave people speech at written documents and with text to speech, so they had both modalities at the same time, and we tested their comprehension. Their comprehension was essentially the same, but with the faster rate of speech, what people would do is after the system stopped speaking to them, they would go back and review the text, reading it themselves, and they'd spend a lot of time doing that review they'd spend more time if the rate of speech was faster. So even though some people really wanted a fast rate, you have to balance this out between what's best for your comprehension, what's best for your desired rate. We looked at highlighting. There was no difference whether we gave them highlighting or not, but people really preferred the highlighting. So again, I don't know quite what's going on there. There was such a strong preference for it, but either word or sentence highlighting, but it didn't show up as a comprehension difference. And the last one we did was processing time. Oh yes, we looked at, we personalized systems for people with aphasia. So we gave them their rate of speech that they wanted, the voice they wanted, the highlighting that they wanted. We, again, did not find a comprehension difference, but we found that they were twice as fast, 3 times as fast, 4 times as fast if they use the text to speech. So it didn't take this enormous amount of time to process the information if they had the text to speech support. Now, I want to take a minute here to tell you what's wrong with this research, because I can do that because it's my research. We were giving people newspaper articles, passages that we wrote, and we're trying to make it real life. So we would use real newspaper articles. And we modified them minimally so that it was as true as it could be, but sometimes we'd shorten the article, something like that. And then we'd ask them questions about it. Well, because these were 1 or 2 paragraph articles, we had to ask nitpicky questions. They were questions that I would have had trouble answering if I weren't really paying attention to say, I want to remember this. You know, like, what was the name of this person and what year did this happen in? And they were nitpicky questions. I'm not surprised there was no difference in comprehension accuracy because of the types of questions we were asking, which brings us to what we last did. We said, okay, forget this little stuff that we're making up. We're going to read a book. And this was huge. First of all, people with aphasia were thrilled. Read a book. This was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get to read a book. So we wanted to know, if we give them text-to-speech support, is it going to help them read that book? We gave them the content, half of the content in text-to-speech support, and half of the content they had to just read by themselves. We looked at their comprehension, we looked at their processing time, and we looked at their preferences. Okay, this chart. Oh, and we had people with aphasia doing this. We also had people without aphasia. So here are your people without aphasia, and this particular chart is reading comprehension. And you can say people without aphasia, that yeah, they comprehend the whole thing, no problem. Okay, we had to do that just to make sure that we were asking legitimate questions. But here's your data for the people with aphasia. And these were people with a whole range of aphasia, some severe, some very mild. Okay, so we really have quite a discrepancy in our variability, inability to read. The read-only condition, that's this one. you can see the reading comprehension is about 75% on average here. This is the text-to-speech condition, and it jumps up to about 85, maybe a little bit higher than that. That's a pretty substantial jump in reading comprehension. They comprehend better when you give them the text-to-speech support. And this wasn't the nitpicky questions. They were reading chapters of a book now. And they would read a couple chapters, and then we would test them on those couple chapters, and then they'd get the next couple chapters in the other condition, and we'd test them on that, and we'd go back and forth and back and forth. Statistically, this is significant, this difference in comprehension. Now, you can also say, well, there's a slight difference here, and people actually, normal readers, normal healthy adults, actually comprehend a little bit better without text-to-speech. They didn't like the text-to-speech, but the people with aphasia loved it. Okay, so there's a difference here. Processing time. How long does it take? Now, notice this is minutes, and this is minutes to read about 15 to 20 pages. Okay, read-only condition. Well, first of all, we got somebody here taking 1,500 minutes, and I can't quickly compute that to how many hours it is, but it's hours and hours and hours that this person was spending trying to read 15 to 20 pages. Did you compute it?
25.
25 hours. Yeah, 25 hours. With text-to-speech support, that particular person, participant E, still was taking a long time, 800 minutes, 10 hours, 12 hours, something like that, 12 hours. But that's a whole lot better than 25 hours. So half the time. And that's basically what we found. We go from about 500 minutes to 250 minutes to process that information. So a huge difference, less time needed. Again, you can look at the difference here of the neurotypical healthy adults, and they did worse with the text-to-speech. It slowed them down. They didn't have the choice of not doing it with text. I mean, they could try to ignore the spoken part if they wanted to and just read on their own, but they actually would do better if they could just read on their own.
Could they control the speed at which the text?
Yes.
Is, okay.
In this study, they picked their own speed. So
Okay.
yes, they could control it. Okay, preferences. Without a doubt, people with aphasia, they wanted the text-to-speech support, and they wanted to know what book they could read next and when were we going to do it. They were thrilled. They want the text-to-speech support. There were a couple people in the study who said, nope, don't want it, because if I use that, my reading won't get better on its own. They wanted to work on their reading. They didn't want to read the book. They wanted to work on their reading. There's a difference between therapy and real life. And in therapy, you work on your reading. Yeah, I want to regain those reading skills. Real life, you may or may not want to work on your reading. You may just want to find out what happens next in the book. But that was a complaint that some people had. We also had two people in that study who were determined they were going to get 100% right on every comprehension test. I mean, they were determined, and they spent a lot of time, put a lot of effort in because of that also. People without aphasia, they don't want the TTS. It gets in the way. They just don't like it. And they tried to ignore it, but that was hard to do. So what does this mean? Text-to-speech technology has huge potential for at least some people with aphasia. It's not going to work for everybody. If they've got auditory comprehension problems that are worse than their reading comprehension problems, it may not help. We need to look at what kinds of supports help in what conditions. We need to recognize that multiple approaches may be needed. We may need text-to-speech support, but we may also need the increase in font size and the increased white spaces and the pictures. We need to be very careful about those modifiable text-to-speech features. That has turned out to be really important, especially rate of speech. People want the rate that they want. They have a habitual reading rate and they want the text-to-speech to match that. If it goes too fast, they can't keep up. If it goes too slow, it holds them back and that throws them off. So that's a very important one we found. We are actually starting another book club. We are about to start data collection for another book club in which we will provide everybody with their option. You can use text-to-speech or you cannot at your choice instead of our dictating when they use it and when they don't. And we're also starting to look at, we've got a study that I just finished revising the manuscript yesterday that is on eye tracking behaviors when they're using text-to-speech technology and what that does to the way people with aphasia process text with their eyes, what it is they look at.
Question for you. Someone asked, has this technique been applied to neuropsych testing?
No, it has not. It probably could be, but we would need to establish, how does this affect the standardization of the testing?
Okay.
So you'd need new norms. You'd need new norms with the text-to-speech available. And the other thing is that there is a little bit, very short, but there is a little bit of an adjustment period of getting used to using text-to-speech. So I wouldn't want to just throw it at somebody without their ever having seen it before and say, oh, we're going to test you today on your comprehension and, you know, we're going to provide this support to you. So I'd want to do a little bit of preparation work with the person.
Okay. And then someone also asked, can you have one entity without the other? So I'm assuming they're talking about, which I maybe just reiterate one more time, but I seem to recall a person who did fine with reading, but could not comprehend numbers. Maybe reading and numbers.
Yes. Working with numbers are another symbolic processing issue. It's another symbol system. And so just like language, working with numbers is a language system. It's a symbolic processing task. And some people with aphasia are going to have particular problems with that.
Okay.
It's everybody's individual. There's not going to be a one size fits every person with aphasia. Everybody's going to have unique strengths and challenges based on exactly where the damage was and how their language system is arranged in their brain. We can make generalities, but everybody's different.
Sure.
Okay, so what do we do for people with aphasia? Well, first of all, get audiobooks. Get a hard copy of the book and get an audio copy of the book. And then the person can follow along as they're reading. Now, the problem with that is that it's not like text-to-speech where it says, this is where you are. It doesn't give you that highlighted word to keep you on track. You have to figure out for yourself the link between the audio and the visual input. But it's a great way to try this out. You may find that this really helps a person with aphasia. Try text-to-speech systems. They're free, many of them, and adjust the features, figure out what works for that person. Look for aphasia-friendly texts. If you can find them, large print books is a great way to start. They're not going to have the pictures usually, but there are also large print magazines, materials for people with visual impairments may be a place to start. And test out any strategies that might help. Does it help the person to look for keywords, scan for keywords first? Does it help for them to read bold print in magazine articles first, or headlines in newspapers first? And definitely join a book club. People with aphasia want to read. And so let them join a book club. By the way, does this work with people with traumatic brain injury? Yes. We've not done nearly the amount of research there, but we've dabbled in it a little tiny bit. We get the same result, increased reading rate, comparable comprehension. They prefer the text-to-speech. And we got the same result for a person who had traumatic brain injury who also had mild aphasia, exact same result. Okay, so here I promised you what systems. Here's a list of some of the systems that are available right now. I'll tell you that and I have no affiliation with any of these manufacturers, so I have no reason to promote one over the other. But what I can tell you is that what we used was Natural Reader. It's free. There's a paid version. There's a free version. We used the free version. The paid version, you get some more sophisticated voices, but the free version wasn't bad. Many of these are free, or they have a free version. There are some that do not have free versions, like the Kurzweil, and Kurzweil 3000 costs about $1,000. So that shows you the difference in expense that you're going to be putting forth. Many of the others that do have a charge are much lower than that. The problem usually is, what voices do they offer? Do they have a decent voice? And how easy is it to upload the materials? Can you get a PDF? Will they accept just any PDF of the materials? And you can get PDFs of any book now. That I literally mean that, not something that's come out today, but any book that's a couple years old, you're going to be able to get a PDF of it. Okay, take home message. Aphasia-friendly modifications are helpful, but they take a ton of time. Go with things that have pictures. Okay. Text-to-speech technology helps many, but not all people with aphasia. It helps with reading speed pretty universally, not entirely, but pretty universally, and sometimes very dramatically. And it helps with reading comprehension for at least half of the people. And if you're going with longer materials, it helps more with comprehension. Most people seem to prefer using the TTH technology over reading without support. And then finally, I've listed all of these references that I pulled material from for this presentation, so you can get those off of the handouts, that you can print out from this.
Yes, definitely. We will be attaching the PDF of this presentation to your certificate of completion once you do an evaluation. So speaking of that, before I do have a couple questions for you here, Dr. Hux, but I'm going to launch a poll on the screen. So if you are wanting a certificate of completion, please make sure that you answer that. That should be on your screen now. I'll leave that up while we are answering some questions here. Someone asked, how does one get diagnosed with aphasia that doesn't have brain damage? This question, it looks like fairly timely. They said Bruce Willis as an example, or did he have a stroke of some sort? I'm assuming not knowing his entire, diagnosis or his medical condition. It'd be a tough one to answer particularly, but is there a way someone can be diagnosed with aphasia without a brain injury, without a stroke, something like that?
Yeah, sometimes there are. It's going to be a disorder of the brain of some sort, because that's where we process language in our bodies.
Sure.
So it's going to be something to do with the brain, but it's not always a stroke that causes aphasia. You can get aphasia from tumors. You can get aphasia from progressive disorders like dementia. Eventually results in aphasia. There are some unusual. There's a primary progressive aphasia where it's like dementia, except it only affects the language system. So it's a unique type of dementia, and that could also cause aphasia. The best way to get a diagnosis is to see a speech language pathologist.
Okay. And then someone did ask, if you do not see the question or the poll question on your screen, it may be something on your end, possibly like a pop-up blocker of sorts. If you could just reach out to us at qlibwebinars@qliomaha.com and just say, hey, I was on, didn't see the poll question. We'll make sure you get sent over the evaluation to complete. So with that said, I think we have a majority of the questions answered. Do you have your contact information? If you have any questions for Dr. Hux, go ahead and just respond to that or send them to that same email address. So qlibwebinars@qliomaha.com. And we will make sure that we get those over to Dr. Hux to answer.
Okay.
If you have any. So Dr. Snell said, great presentation. So
thank you.
Truly, we appreciate the time you put into this, and I know is a a passion project of yours. And so we appreciate you presenting it to us. Stay tuned for information about next month's presentation. Steve Kershke will be presenting a new topic for us. So that'll be coming out in the next couple weeks, and then be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us. If not today, it'll hit your inboxes tomorrow, which will include your evaluation link. So please fill that out to receive your certificate of completion.